All right. Well, so yes, in the second session, a little bit more practical, but we're going to be focusing on pathways, integration, and hospitality. So starting with pathways, as Tim mentioned, one of the key inputs for building a biblical church community is some basic systems and structures. So we believe that the most foundational structure that your church needs is some kind of discipleship or integration pathway. That is, you really need a way of moving people from non-Christians through to mature believers. There are plenty of options out there for pathways. Some examples are you could go connect, grow, serve, and go. You could go engage, evangelize, establish, and equip. Or community, crowd, congregation, committed, and core. These aren't the only pathways that are out there, and each of these examples definitely have strengths and weaknesses. But at the end of the day, whichever pathway you choose, whichever pathway you go with, it's more important that you actually have one. That's because the power of a pathway is that it will help you break down where people are on their discipleship journey. And it will help you reflect on what you can do to help them move to their next step. Because if you don't know where people are in the pathway, you won't know their next step and you won't know how to love them best. So at Grace City, we use the version of the 5 C's, and that should come up as a slide for you. For the sake of time, I won't go through it all, but you can see, there we go. You can see from the direction of the arrow that the goal is to move people. So from the outer circle, maybe unhelpfully it's called community, and it's a reference to the community outside of the church. At moving through to the inner circles by walking them through a series of next steps in the form of explore, onboard, and ministry interview, which you can see up the top there. So you might be wondering, well, how does this pathway contribute to the building of a biblical community? Well, each step along the pathway is seeking to further clarify what it looks like to belong and be a member of a biblical church. So for example, you have explore. And Explore is a series of courses introducing people to Jesus and encouraging them to become followers of Christ. You've then got Onboard. So Onboard is a 2-hour course in which we're trying to give Christians a biblical understanding of church membership before connecting them into a small group. And then hopefully they're in a small group serving. Next up is the interview. So it's a one-on-one chat with members where we talk to them about the importance of pursuing greatness by serving others. And we give them an opportunity to do that by joining a ministry team. In other words, each step along the pathway, it's really trying to connect people into and to facilitate their engagement in an ever-growing community of forgiven sinners, characterized by loving attitudes and loving actions. Again, you don't need to use this same pathway or the next steps that we do, but we think building some kind of clear integration pathway is really critical if you want a biblical community as opposed to a big crowd. And it will help you know who you're responsible for, what their next step is, and how you can love them best. Secondly, we're going to talk about a warm and welcoming community. So Tim mentioned before that we want to create communities that live out the one another commands in Scripture. And so one of these one another commands is found in Romans 15 verse 7. And Paul writes, "Welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you for the glory of God." And I think we all know that we follow a welcoming God, and our churches need to reflect that. If our communities are constantly welcoming others, they will inevitably grow. And that's why we've said throughout today that the outcome we're aiming for is an ever-growing community of forgiven sinners. But welcoming is tricky, so how can we do it well? And that's what we're going to talk about now. So firstly, it's understanding bridges. One of the most important steps to welcoming people into your church is to recognize that there are typically 3 mini bridges that someone will need to cross in order to join your church, and you can see that on the slide. Even if you don't have an official membership course, these 3 bridges will still be true for you in your church. So as you can see, someone crosses bridge 1 when they come to your church for a second time. They cross bridge 2 when they come back to your church for a third or a fourth time. And they cross bridge 3 when they go from being a regular attender to a member of your church. Now, if you're wondering what practical benefit this has, the key to appreciate is the power of simply recognizing these 3 bridges. Knowledge is power, and once you know that these 3 steps exist, you can start to think about practical ways in which you can help people to cross a bridge. For example, you might start asking questions like, is there anything we can do to make a first-time guest more likely to come back for a second time? So at Grace City, a first-time guest will get a welcome pack, they'll get a coffee card, and if they go to the night service, they'll also get like a card for dinner, so they can get it for free. And now we're thinking, all right, for a first-time guest, well, maybe we give them 2 coffee vouchers so that they come, they have their free coffee one Sunday, and then the next week they're like, should I come back to church? Yeah, I'm going to go and use my second coffee voucher, which for a uni student will probably work. Just a side note on the card as well, we used to say every first timer gets a free coffee, but now we give them a card because we want to remove any awkwardness and uncomfortable feelings we can. Because if I'm a new person, I go to the cafe team and I say, can I get a cappuccino? And they say, yeah, it's $2. I'm going to have to tell them, oh, I'm new, don't I get it for free? I want to remove that completely. I want to give them a card, they hand it in, and the cafe person knows that person's new. What's your name? Welcome to Grace City, so great to have you. Thinking about the detail and how you can make it comfortable for a first timer. All right, what about second time guests? So presumably they've come back for a reason. How are their needs different from a first timer? And they're not quite a regular attender yet. They've just come back a second time. What can you do that will help them come back a third or fourth time? And what about those who are regular attenders, but they're not members yet? They haven't crossed that final bridge. So you can start asking, well, what's stopping them from taking the next step into church life? And what do they need to do to be willing to call this church home? Thanks, that's good with the slide. Simply recognizing the reality of these steps will help you to love and care for each of the people who are coming to your church according to their needs, as opposed to treating everyone in the same generic way. One brief example is there's a girl coming to 6 p.m, a lady, we're chatting over dinner. It's one of her first weeks. I start to hear a bit of a story. I realized that she's a solid Christian. The last church she was at, after attending that church for 3 months, she realized it was a cult. It was quite a shocking experience for her. She really thought it was a Bible-believing church, and they were unclear about some things. Anyway, so we're having dinner, I hear about it. Okay, I get her number, we meet up for coffee, debrief a little bit more. But then I hear a month later she's going to On Board. And On Board, we talk a lot about membership, which is important. But for someone who's their last church they were at was a cult, talking about membership might make her concerned. She might have a lot of questions. So I just want to see, is On Board going to be talking about membership? Is that going to freak her out? Maybe keep her a regular attender, not necessarily cross that last bridge and being a member. We just kind of want to, the more you can know people, the more your welcomers can know people, a bit of their story, where they've come from, you can help prevent anyone slipping through the cracks and not crossing over those bridges. Finally, oozing hospitality. So once you recognize the importance of helping people to cross those 3 bridges, it's time to think about all the things in your Sunday service ecosystem that might help influence how warm and welcoming someone's experience of your community might be. So at Grace City, we really want to do everything we can to ooze hospitality on a Sunday because we want our guests to feel welcomed and we want them to have a desire to come back. To help us consider how to do this well, we have a triangle, which you'll be able to see. And we've pulled together some of the key things that we really want to be paying attention to before, during, and after the Sunday service. So there you go, thanks. So in terms of understanding how to read this triangle, there's a few exceptions for your guests, but overall, this is kind of how they will experience things. So from top to bottom, they'll experience it from top to bottom, which also means that you have the least control over the things at the bottom of the triangle. You'll also notice that the left-hand side, so that highlights the people that your guests will encounter, but the right-hand side highlights the programs, the non-people side of things that your guests will encounter. This is probably not revolutionary for you, but we found that separating all these elements, these different aspects out, and then individually going through each section, being able to think through, okay, how can each area ooze hospitality? What is everything humanly possible we can do to ooze hospitality so that people feel welcomed, loved, so that they want to come back?